Hey everyone, my name is Shauna and I'm a licensed social worker, practicing therapist, and restorative justice practitioner, and I'll be your host. Welcome to the Best Friend Divorce Podcast. Thank you for being here and giving us your time and space and attention. And just a reminder, if you're interested in bloopers, additional content, and behind-the-scenes clips, you can check us out on social media at BF Divorce Pod on Instagram and X, formerly known as Twitter, and you can support us from the beginning by joining the Divorce Party on our Patreon. Today's episode focuses on navigating a best friend divorce, or BFD for short, that still lives in the gray area. This BFD had a clear rift, a super slow journey to reconciliation, but is forever transformed from what it once was. We interview my home slice, the brilliant, the incomparable nonprofit extraordinaire, and just all around amazing comrade in racial justice. She is a mama supreme, a Puerto Riqueña true and through. If you know, you know. Everyone, Cecy Ramirez. She spent some time with us to dive deep into the makings of how reconciliation is possible, even when we've reached the point of no return in our rift. I'll open our show with an important quote by Audre Lorde for you to hold on to while you listen. The love expressed between women is particular and powerful because we had to love in order to live. Love has been our survival. So welcome to the Best Friend Divorce Podcast. Let's dive in.
Thanks for having me. I'm Cecy. My name is Cecilia, but I go by Cecy, she, her pronouns. I'm originally from New York City, born and raised. I live outside of Atlanta now. I've been in the nonprofit space for most of my career. I'm also a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant and coach. I'm a mother of two, a wife of one, and I have two awesome kiddos that I'm also trying to raise in a equitable minded sort of frame, which can be a challenge in the South, maybe anywhere, but it feels particularly challenging in the South. And in regards to our topic for today, I am a lifelong people collector, as a friend of mine calls me. And so I think I've encountered, but I'm open to pushback, what you're describing a few times in my life. So,
yeah, thank you for that. And that is very normal to have encountered like some sort of rupture over the course of someone's life. So what we like to do in this space is we like to do a little bit of a check-in just to get to know you, but also warm you up to talking. We are just chatting, like we are having our little discussion. Except we don't have wine and we're not outside. We're not outside.
You say you outside.
But you're not outside. So let's check in. If you had 24 hours to be invisible, what would you do and why?
The first thought that popped into my head was like, I go rob a bank. But then I was like, I don't want to do that. That sounds like a lot of work. I don't know. That's a funny question. I'd probably people watch even more than I do. I'm a people watcher. So I'd just watch in an even spookier way, which is creepy, right? I wouldn't watch people in their personal space.
Okay.
Like people watching.
Good distinction. Thank you for clarifying. That's important to know. So you would do some people watching and you have 24 hours. You're going to do that for 24 hours, are you?
I might rob a bank, or maybe I'd like trip up mean people. I don't know. I'm a child. I'd probably do silly things like go to the police station and mess up their paperwork or something.
That sounds fun. If I had 24 hours to be invisible, I would do a couple things. The first thing I would do is scare the crap out of my cousin. I love her so much. She deserves a good fright. Like, I would just go and open all of her kitchen cabinets, poltergeist style and just have her wake up in the morning or in the middle of the night and see that. I would delight in that. And I would I would probably go to New Orleans and see Beyonce. So I would just walk right in because
Oh, that's a good answer.
those are the two things I would do. And you'd be surprised when I've asked people this question. One person was like, "Oh, I would go see a Knicks game," and I was like, "Spoiler alert, they're gonna lose." Like, there's no element of excitement and surprise there. So I actually really appreciated your answer of doing childlike things. Cool. Thank you for checking in with us. We got to know a little bit more about your personalities. I want you to talk to us about your best friend divorce, the one that's been the most impactful. I know you've said you had a few.
Yeah.
What were the circumstances? Who were involved? Obviously, we don't use real names here, so don't look for that, folks. But what led up to the rupture of the friendship?
The biggest one, I think, was one of my childhood best friends who honestly I'm still in contact with. But I think the rupture occurred over 2 decades, I would say, into our friendship. Again, it was a childhood friendship. So when we met, we were like very young. And I don't know if there was like a thing that happened that led to the rupture, but I think there were a series of small, just moments of me feeling like she was putting herself first that eventually led to me making the decision that I just couldn't be in the relationship anymore. Yeah.
So, how did you two meet?
We met in second grade.
Wow.
Yeah, I think we were in the same class. And yeah, so we very much grew up together. Like our moms knew each other. And as my mom passed away very young in life, so she's one of the few people in my entire life, like including my husband, that even know my mom or knew my mom, got to meet her. So yeah, we met and instantly we were just kind of two peas in a pod. We were both really smart kids, loved participating in all the like school events and competitions and that kind of thing. And for years and years, we were just like, we lived nearby each other. We would go to each other's house and everybody knew us as the two best friends. We had other friends, but it was like she and I were the homies.
So second grade is a long time to sustain a friendship. So how were you both able to grow? What were some of the key elements to help y'all keep that connection going?
There was a few things. I think one, we genuinely had a lot in common. We liked the same music and shows and activities. And then in our sort of coming of age periods, we thought the same guys were cute. We wanted to dress similarly. So that was definitely a fundamental part of it, right? Like the chemistry. We had fun together. We'd get in trouble together. And that was always fun. Not always fun, but it was fun sometimes. I think there were also moments in life that brought us closer. Like I said, my mom passed away when I was only in fifth grade, and she and her family were there for me. Tragic things bring people closer together. And later, when I was in college, where she hit some really low lows, and I was there for her. So I think, in addition to that kind of childlike way that we were connected, there was also some real life foundational pieces that just cemented like our love for one another and our ability to just support each other.
Yeah, absolutely. For those of you who are listening, I have known Cecy for a very long time, since I think I was like 9 or 10 or something like that. So I'm still very sorry to hear about the loss of your mom. And I always hope that her memory is a blessing to you. How would you characterize love in this relationship? What did love in this friendship look like, sound like, and feel like?
It's a good question. I think love was, and I would say has always been very present in my relationship with her. From the beginning, again, as young little girls, love looked like hanging out with each other, lying for each other, covering up stories, helping each other out, helping talk to each other's crush, right? That was love. And then as we grew, I think our love grew, right? And circumstances change, and love looked like listening, looked like being there without judgment. We took two very different paths in life, and neither one of us, I won't say ever judged, because I think it's human to judge and we're not perfect. I think there were moments that I judged her decisions, and there were moments she judged mine. But I think ultimately the love was unconditional, right? Even if I'm going to judge you or hate on what you did or be like, "Ugh, Shauna, really? That's the guy you're going to date, you idiot?" Like the love is going to be there regardless. And I think that kind of love was always there. And I think at some point, I don't know the exact date, that friendship turned into a sisterhood. And to this day, I very much regard her as my sister. But the friendship at one point just changed. And I think now she's more of a sister than a friend, if that makes sense.
What happened and where did things go wrong? What was the harm? And if you were able to heal it, how?
So when I was in college, and my friend, after high school, she decided that she didn't want to go to college. And so she had different jobs and things. She hit a low point, depression, and just trying to figure out like what was next. And me and a few of her other friends were going to college and followed that more traditional, normative sort of trajectory. I think she was lost for many years. And when I would talk to her about it and try to listen and be there, but it didn't feel like things were moving in any direction. And so I asked her, I was like, "Hey, do you want to come live with me?" I was living in Philly at the time. And I said, "We'll get a place together. I can live off campus. I know a lot of people here. Maybe we can find you a job and we can just figure out, maybe this could be your next chapter for a couple of years and see what happens," just to change her scenery. And surprisingly, I was surprised, but she loved the idea. And she moved to Philly from New York. We got a place together, and it was actually quite wonderful for a while. It was like, what better dream than to live with your best friend? I had been away for a couple of years because I also went to boarding school for high school. So for all 4 years of high school, we were distant and just checking in when we could. And this was pre-technology and social media and all of that. So it was a lot harder to stay in touch. It was like writing letters. And it was wonderful. And, we figured out how to decorate our own place and like playing house as young adults. But when you live with someone, things that end up coming up, and those listening, if you've ever lived with anyone, then you can probably relate. Little things like cleaning up started to come up as like a bit of a point of contention. She eventually formed a friendship group. I would introduce her to people, but eventually she had her own relationship with folks that I knew and folks that I didn't know. So there were times where she was like away for a few days with a boyfriend or hanging out and didn't do the things that she said she was going to do in the house. And by that point, I had already been 6 years on my own. So I had many roommates. So it was annoying. I was a neat freak back then. So I would end up cleaning and being like resentful and all of that. But it wasn't necessarily a deal breaker. And then eventually it was like money, right? Your half of the rent is due. She had gotten a couple of jobs, but was unable for several reasons to keep them. Finances became an issue until the point that I was paying for everything. And I think she just had a lot of shame around it with some folks, especially if you have any kind of depression or things like that, that some people's reaction is to detach and disassociate from that reality of shame and embarrassment or insecurity or whatever it is. So she would kind of like physically just be gone for weeks. Rent was due, or there was no toilet paper in the house, or like things like that. And I was a full-time student. I had 3 jobs because hustle culture. So it got to a point where I couldn't keep up with it. And I ended up like borrowing money from a counselor of mine so that we wouldn't get evicted, because we were getting notices and things like that because I couldn't keep up.
Right.
And eventually I did like a settlement with the realty group, and so that they wouldn't take me to court. And I was just like, hey, I could give you this amount of money of what I owe, and then I'll move out. And that's what happened. But I would send her emails like, hey, this is what's going on. I wouldn't hear back. And then finally I was like, hey, this is the day we got to move out by. I'm taking my stuff. If you don't want your stuff like out in the trash, then this is what's going to happen. And she did get her stuff out. It got to a point where I didn't even like coming home. I was also dating somebody, so I would stay at their place a lot. And then that was the first rupture. After we moved out, she moved in with another friend. I got another place that was going to be more affordable for me. And we didn't really talk after that for a while.
So essentially, it sounds like you were caught between a rock and a hard place. You didn't really have the right level of support to even have a conversation with her. It sounds like about like, here's what's happening. Here are our options. What can we do together? Like, it didn't seem like there was very much space for that. And then you made an executive decision to meet yourself where you were and then move on. So what was her response to that? Like, when you were like, we got to move out by this date, come get your stuff or not, it's up to you. But like, how did she respond to it?
There was a point where, because it was like a long period of time. It wasn't like 1 week the rent was due and the next week we moved out. It was probably a good year and change. This was going on. And so throughout that, let's say, year and a half, there were times where she was like, hey, yeah, like I'm working on this. I'm trying to, like, I'm sorry, and like very responsive. And then I think there was also a period of like her resenting me as well. And just to take full accountability, I didn't make it easy. Like I often share I'm a recovering perfectionist. And it's a very real thing. But then like I wanted my house spotless. And when things were out of place, or I didn't care what her room looked like, but my living room, my kitchen, my bathroom, I would put up a big fuss, make a big fuss of it. And so there were moments where she was like, dude, relax. I'm going to clean the dishes, or I'm going to get to it. And I was hard on her, and I would point to every little thing that she was doing wrong. And it got to the point where I was so resentful that she wasn't paying for things that like I would take a roll of toilet paper into the bathroom when I used it, and then take it with me back to my bedroom. Like, you ain't gonna buy no toilet paper. Well, you ain't gonna use no toilet paper, right? Like I was, my petty level was on like 1,000. I remember her mom even called me and she was like, listen, I know my daughter is a mess, but really, like, toilet paper, you're not even gonna let her use your toilet paper? And I was like, toilet paper costs money, right? So I don't know that I was my best self either that period. But I think the moments when she was like in communication with me and sort of explaining like how hard it was or what was going on, started to become fewer and fewer as I became harder and harder. I contributed to definitely pushing her away, to the point where she just didn't really say anything to me.
Yeah, I can see how challenging that might be, or how difficult that might be able to withstand any loving relationship. if we think about like ruptures and harm and conflict, like those things happen when we're not in right relationship with each other.
Right.
And just for you to say this happened over a period of a year and change, that's just compounding the issue. But when you look back at the way you responded and the way she was showing up, what do you believe is the root cause in this particular level of harm?
I think I only speak for myself because I can only speculate, and she and I are very close, so I know a lot about her. So my speculation is not like unfounded, but I'll start with myself and say that because my childhood was so fraught with pain and loss and trauma, including losing my mother, but also beyond losing my mother, I think, especially at the very young age of, I think I was 20 when we moved in together, I think I was very guarded and very armored, right? And ready for anybody to try me. And when, if and when, right? Because it did happen, because you get hurt in life. When it did happen, I was ready like a samurai to like slice you to pieces, because that's what our brain and heart does when you've been harmed and when you experience a lot of pain. Your default becomes, or my default became, protection mode. I saw this as a situation where somebody I really cared about was in a really tough place in life. And what started as a place of like real empathy and wanting to help and support this person that I love more than most people in the world, at some point, right? I don't know the exact moment, like I said before, but it turned into a trigger for me of being taken advantage of feeling unsupported too. Because again, I had my trauma, I had my things that I was going through. I was at that time, I was in a toxic relationship that was pretty abusive, and I couldn't come to her with that. I couldn't come to my best friend to figure out how to navigate that. I had like family issues so there was like a lot going on that I felt alone in, even though I lived with my best friend. So it became this good logical reason to then shut off my empathy and go into survival mode. And my survival mode at that time looked like, I don't need anybody. I don't need you. I don't need your money. I don't need any damn body in this world. And so I got my stuff and I got out of there with very little regard to how that might impact her.
And so you're moved out, she's moved out. It sounds like you both spent some time not talking to each other really for a period of time. So what was, when you think about like healing and accountability, did that ever happen? Did you have to heal things within yourself first before you could? Where are you both now?
Yeah. So it's been a journey. Obviously, we're a lot older now, and I see life differently. My whole life is very different now. It took us many years to even be able to talk again. I think it started off like the sort of rekindling started off as an occasional like happy birthday text. Hope you are well. I consider her family my family, and vice versa. So when things came up, when somebody was sick, when somebody passed away, when we were honoring my mother's death anniversary or something like that, she would show up, right? We didn't talk much. We'd like, hey, how you doing? And that would be the end of it. And when things were going on her side, I'd be like, hey, anything I can do? But it took, I would say, gosh, maybe 5 to 10 years, I'm guessing, but it was a long time before we ever talked about it. And at this point, I've moved around a lot. The proximity just isn't there. But at one point, we started to have an occasional phone call. And it was probably more like closer to 10 years later. And then once I started having children, I'm guessing that was a pull for her to reconnect with me. See, this is where my own healing was essential and hard because I didn't quite know how to respond. So she has always suffered from, I don't know if she has a specific diagnosis, but some form of depression, debilitating depression, but in a very different way. I go into hyperachievement. She's always gone to the opposite extreme, right? And for the listeners, I don't know that either one of these is better than the other. I think they can both be equally toxic. However, society only applauds one. And so throughout the course of the next decade, she had many bouts with that depression and up and down and still trying to figure out like work and life. And at this point, she had a child. And so that made things even more complicated. So I tried to always hold a little bit of empathy for the fact that I know that at least a part of this is beyond her control. And yet it was still challenging for me to not hold resentment and still feel like I was harmed by this person and I don't want to associate with them. Because again, that was my defense mechanism, was when I felt harmed, I left people. The occasional phone call, the check-in, I would be on the phone and go, huh? Yeah. But in my head, I'm like, can't wait for the call to be over. And then there was a period of several years where she would call me once a year. And every single once a year, she was like full blown, inebriated, toxic, drunken on her ass, which I drink. So the drinking wasn't a problem. It was the fact that every phone call I got once a year was when she hit this sort of drunken stupor. And it happened to be the time where she would think about me and feel all of this remorse. And she would call me and cry or share or say, I'm sorry, or sometimes say, you shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z. During those moments, I tried really hard, even though I knew she was drunk, to show up and be like, yeah, I hear you. And we would have good conversations. And sometimes we would work through stuff. Sometimes I'd just listen. Sometimes I'd push back and be like, that's bullshit. This is really what happened, right? I do think that those annual kind of strange calls with all of these sort of emotional vomiting, it became very cathartic for us. And after doing that for about 10 years, I think it felt like we had discussed it. There wasn't a moment where we were like, and now we are friends, right? But it no longer came up. And for me, it felt like, okay, I don't have anything else to say on the matter. And now that created sort of a space to now be grown-ups together. And so our friendship now exists. We're like, we have a group chat with a couple of our other childhood friends. And I've had some loss in the last few years, and she has shown up in a very beautiful way. I've been there to celebrate some of her moments and we connect. But I think in this day and age, that is a viable way of sustaining relationship. And I actually do so successfully with several people. I would say that our friendship now is that like good, let's catch up every once in a while, quick text here and there, but nowhere near the closeness that we had once upon a time.
So now that it's nowhere near where it was before, when you reflect on it, because even when I hear you sharing it, like I can hear how pain is surfacing for her. And for you, I hear a lot of, I've had to walk away or do something else, or other things were happening in my life that I had to pay attention to. But I'm curious about, when you reflect on how you engaged in harm, what's something that you would have done differently? And how do you imagine things would have gone if you had made a different choice in the moment?
That's a tough question. I don't know that I could have done anything differently, just from a developmental standpoint. I didn't have the tools that I have now.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's one of those, if I knew then what I know now, situations, then I think I would advise my younger self to not try to save people. That was something that I did a lot. It was hard for me to see other people in pain or alone, or because I knew it. I knew that pain, that trauma, that hurt so well, so intimately, that I often wanted to take it away from people. And especially if you were close to me. And it took me a long time, and every once in a while it resurfaces. It took me a long time to remember and realize that people have to go on their journeys. And it can be a disservice to try to remove the hurdles from their journey so that they don't have to suffer. And sometimes you got to let people go. It doesn't mean it's forever. It might be, but you don't know that. But sometimes you got to let people go so that they can go on their journey, and it'll be hard to watch. And that doesn't mean you don't show compassion or try to help out where you can, but that's not what I was doing. I think I was one point trying to fix my friend's life. And that is an incredibly selfish and arrogant place to stand.
Why do you say that?
Because nobody can fix your life except you. And for me to think that I, in my grand stature and wide, all-encompassing wisdom at 19 years old, could do that for an entire other human, it's silly. It's silly. And I think if I really want to be honest with myself, what I was doing was judging her and trying to evangelize the way of life that I had so as to shed some light to this poor lost soul, which is gross, right? Which is condescending, which is belittling and dehumanizing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes that's the only place that we know, right? If we have done better, sometimes we want other people to do where we are,
right?
Even if we don't realize that we're not even at the best yet, or this may not be the right path for this person just because it's the right path for you, and that can be just as harmful as anything that we say.
Yeah. And I look back on that now. I generally have a philosophy in life that, I don't have regrets. Like I try to use, like, things happen. I make decisions that I thought were the right thing in the moment. So I generally don't like to say I have regrets. However, I do look back on that decision to call her and say, hey, let's move in together, and wonder if it did more harm than good ultimately.
Which sometimes we just don't know, because at the end of the day, you invited her, but her life is another life in the story that we just don't know how important that impact was. What would have happened if she would have stayed where she was instead of moving in with you?
Yep.
There's always like the little unknowns.
Yeah.
So for you, do you have a hope or an expectation that as long as it took to repair this is as long as it might take to get back to what it once was? Or have you made peace with where y'all are now?
I'm trying to give you an honest answer, because sometimes my first answer is masking something. I think I've made peace with myself, and I'm still a work in progress. Like I said, I joke about I'm a recovering perfectionist, but that's sort of a cute, succinct way of saying I'm actually a recovering PTSD sufferer, right? I'm a recovering traumatized child. I'm a recovering codependent person. I'm a recovering people pleaser. I'm a recovering mask wearer. Like that's a cute headline for a much deeper and complicated journey that I've been on for a long time. But part of that journey that I have loved is really embracing all of those layers of my identity. And I say that because it's actually allowed me to just receive people as they are and have deeper connections than ever in my entire life. And I introduced myself today as a people collector. Shout out to my friend who coined me as such. But I don't mean it in a trivial way, right? I don't mean it in like a superficial, like I like having friends and I'm popular. My own pain and healing journey throughout my life has actually enabled me to see the humanity in others. And we fuck up. I have fucked up. And so I've come to peace with that reality. And because I've come to peace with that reality, and I've collected these beautiful friendships over the years, I've been able to accept the friendship that I have with this woman and accept the friendship that I no longer have with this woman. And I don't put expectations on any of my relationships. Maybe with my husband, I do. But I've entered a space for the last decade or so, maybe 5 years, of like really appreciating what pieces of people I have, what they each contribute to my life and what I get to contribute to their life. And for she and I right now, it's like funny text messages and updates on her daughter graduating and my kids doing something funny, and where it's usually in a group setting, right? And every once in a while we'll have a one-on-one like exchange. And that's all right with me. If you told me that's the way it's going to be for the rest of my life, I'd say, cool. Because I no longer feel heaviness around it. And if it changed into something closer, cool. If it changed into something more distant, cool.
Yeah.
That's where I am with it.
Thank you very much for this conversation for this morning. I just appreciate you being vulnerable enough to come on and share this and talk with us about it and all the lessons you learned. So thank you for taking us home with that great piece of wisdom.
Of course. Thank you for having me. And thank you for creating the space to share this out loud.
You're very welcome. You are very welcome. All right, y'all, that's all we got for today. Just want you to know that healing looks so different for each of us. I hope you took away some gems that you can use on your own pathway towards healing. And we'd also love to hear from you. What did you think about our conversation with Cecy? Would you reconcile with a bestie if the divorce was clear but still painful? Do you believe love, like Auntie Audrey said, is our survival and that's how we reconcile? Or is it just better to be like, nah, I'm good, and part ways once and for all? Sound off via email or voice note at bfdpod@gmail.com. And as always, thank you for being here and listening, because you really didn't have to, but we appreciate you. We hope you'll join us for our next episode. Before you go, here's a snippet from the rest of Cecy and I's conversation.
Both pain and healing, they are not a period, they're a comma. It doesn't have to stop when you think you've healed, right? Like, it's a comma, there's more to come. And that's true with pain and trauma as well. I actually would encourage people to think very carefully about placing periods on any relationship.
Hear more when you join the Divorce Party, our Patreon community. Trust me, it's a time. And you can follow us on IG and X, formerly known as Twitter, at BF Divorce Pod. Until next time, we need you to know, for real, you're not alone. The Best Friend Divorce Pod is hosted and executive produced by me, Shauna Llewellyn, with production by Nancy Kwamboka of Savvy Podcasting Solutions and editorial support by Keisha TK Dutes of Philo's Future Media.